Good morning, dear students. Today we shall begin with the second chapter of economics, and the name of the chapter is Sectors of Indian Economy. So, the first topic is introduction. Different person perform different activities for earning their livelihood. Some people are engaged in agricultural operations, some are engaged in transportation, education, health, banking, insurance, communication, armed forces, etc. All these activities are broadly classified into three major groups on the basis of common characteristics. These groups of economic activities are known as sectors of the economy. So, students, people are engaged in different types of activities. Someone is a doctor, the other are teachers, engineers, plumbers, drivers. They can be casual, unskilled laborers. Someone is a shopkeeper, someone works in armed forces. So there are various kinds of activities that are taken up by different individuals, and the purpose for which they take up these activities is to earn money. Now these activities are so many that they need to be grouped and they need to be classified. So on the basis of common characteristics, these groups have been created, and these groups are known as sectors of an economy. The basis of these groups are the economic activity. Similar kind of economic activities are grouped into one single group. So let us see. Sectors of Indian economy have been classified on three bases. The first one is on the basis of nature of activities. So the nature of activity has been classified, it has been grouped into three kinds of sector. The first one is primary, second is secondary, and the third one is tertiary sector. The second basis is on the basis of ownership. So on the basis of ownership, there are two kinds of sector: private sector and public sector. The third basis is on the basis of working conditions. So there are two types of sectors over here: organized sector and unorganized sector. So the first one that we will be discussing is sectors on the basis of nature of activities. Let me tell you, my dear students, it is the most important basis. Now the first sector is primary sector. This sector includes all such activities that are undertaken by using natural resources such as agriculture, animal husbandry, forestry, fishing, poultry farming, mining, etc. The sector is also known as agriculture and related activities. So in this primary sector, all those activities that are undertaken by using natural resources has been kept. Okay, and the major part of primary sector is occupied by agriculture. Agriculture is the main component or main occupation that comes under primary sector. Along with it, various other activities which uses natural resources also fall into this, such as fishing, mining, poultry farming, etc. And this sector is also known as agriculture and related activities. In all countries in the initial stages of economic development, primary occupation remains dominant. But as the country heads towards economic development, proportionate share of these occupations in the national income goes on diminishing. So, whenever a country is at the initial stage of economic development, when a country falls into the category of being underdeveloped, or whenever it is even a developing country, in that stage, primary occupation is the most important and most dominant one. Majority of the population of such countries will be engaged in agriculture and related activities. But as the country moves towards economic development, the share of this primary sector, the contribution of primary sector, becomes lesser and lesser, and the contribution of other two sectors increases. Secondary sector. The sector includes various manufacturing activities which are performed in factories. It includes all types of industries such as large scale industry, small scale industries, and cottage industries. It is also known as industrial sector. This sector adds usefulness to the products made by primary sector or other man-made products. So the purpose of secondary sector is to manufacture products, okay? And this manufacturing is taken up in all types of industries. And there are mainly three types of industries. The first one is large scale industry, second one is small scale industry, and third one is cottage industry. Large scale industries are those industries which have got huge amount of capital invested in them, and their amount of production of goods are very huge. Small scale industry, on the contrary, has got very little and basic machinery, and their production is comparatively lesser. Cottage industry, on the other hand, is a very small form of industry. It is basically the smallest form of industry rather, which is usually taken up in the houses itself, and it requires very less amount of investment and negligible machineries are used. Now, since various industries are involved in this sector is also known as industrial sector, and the main purpose of this sector is to add usefulness or utility to a product which has been either made by primary sector, or it may even be a man-made product. But the main purpose remains the same, to add usefulness to a particular product. For example, if primary sector produces wheat, it may not be very useful to the consumer. Of course, we all need wheat to consume chapatis, but if that wheat changes its form, if the baker converts it into a bread or a biscuit, it is going to be more useful. More number of people would like to consume it. So that is how usefulness is added. For example, cotton is a primary product produced by primary sector. Manufacturing sector adds utility to cotton by converting its form to cloth. So over here there is this example of cotton. Cotton is grown on agricultural land. It is a primary product, and the manufacturing sector makes it more useful. It adds utility to cotton by converting its form from cotton to cloth. Cotton might not be very useful to us, but once it is converted into cloth, it is very useful for the consumers, for us. Similarly, extracting iron ore is a primary activity. By converting iron ore to steel is a manufacturing activity. Finished steel has more utility than iron ore. So there is this another example, that extracting iron ore, as I have told you, whenever natural resources are used, that activity comes under primary activity. So extracting iron ore is a primary activity, but iron ore is not very useful to us, so it has to be converted. So that converting is done in manufacturing sector. Iron ore is converted into steel, and then that steel is used to produce various kinds of commodities. This sector is more developed in developed nation and less developed in underdeveloped countries. So this secondary sector is less developed in developing nation because the resources are very less that are available to them. The resources in terms of money or in terms of input that has to be used, or even the technology that they are going to use is not very advanced. As a result, the manufacturing sector in all these developing and underdeveloped countries are less advanced as compared to a developed country. The third sector is tertiary sector. It is also known as service sector. It includes all such activities that are helpful in the production process of economy. These activities generate services for the persons engaged in primary and secondary sector. Service sector includes services like transportation, telecommunication, banking, storage, courier services, real estate, etc. So this tertiary sector is also known as service sector because the purpose of this sector is to provide various services to the producers who belong to the other two sectors, that is primary and secondary sector. And the main purpose of tertiary sector is to help the producers belonging to the other two sectors in the production process. And the services that they provide are transportation, telecommunication, banking, storage, etc. There are various varieties of services that are provided to the producers so that these producers are able to produce more and more number of goods. Service sector also includes certain services which are not directly helpful in the production process, but these are very essential for development, comfort and good quality of life. For example, the services of doctor, teacher, security personnel, beauticians, domestic servants, etc. So the main purpose of service sector is to facilitate production of primary and secondary sector, but along with this there are various other kinds of services that do not help in production process, but they help us in leading a good quality, comfortable life. And these services are the services of doctors, teachers, security personnel, beauticians, domestic servants, etc. Okay, so doctors do not help in production in primary or secondary sectors, but they help us in time of need. When we are unwell, they help us, and as a result we are able to lead a good quality life. Same goes for teachers. Teachers do not produce any commodity, or they do not help the primary or secondary sectors, but they uh, improve the quality of life by adding knowledge. Security personnel, again, they provide security services. Beautician helps us in becoming more beautiful, in looking more beautiful, and as a result we feel more confident. Domestic servants are very important part of our society. They help us in leading good quality of life. They do work for us, they come to our houses and they perform all the activities in exchange of certain amount of money. Now this example over here in this table 2.1 says that economic activities, even though they are grouped in various categories, they are very much interdependent. And over here we will be able to see how they are interdependent. Okay, so table 2.1 has got examples, and the next column is about what does this show. So the first example is, imagine what would happen if farmers refuse to sell sugarcane to a particular sugar mill. The mill will have to shut down. So what does this show? This is an example of secondary or industrial sector being dependent on the primary sector. The second example says, imagine what would happen to cotton cultivation if companies decide not to buy from the Indian market and import all cotton they need from other countries. Indian cotton cultivation will become less profitable and the farmers may even go bankrupt if they cannot quickly switch to other crops. Cotton prices will fall. So this example shows that primary sector is very much dependent on secondary sector. If secondary sector is not going to purchase their output, the primary sector professionals, the farmers, are going to incur huge amount of losses. The third example is, farmers buy many goods such as tractors, pump sets, electricity, pesticides, and fertilizers. Imagine what would happen if the price of fertilizers and pump sets go up. Cost of cultivation of the farmers will rise and their profits will be reduced. So this example shows that the farmers are dependent on, or rather the primary sector is dependent on the secondary sector. The farmers need the products that are being manufactured in the secondary sector, and if the price of these commodities rises, the farmers are going to it is going to be very difficult for them to incur this cost, and as a result their profit is going to become low. The last example says, people working in industrial and service sectors need food. Imagine what would happen if there is a strike by transporters and lorries refuse to take vegetables and milk, etc. from rural areas. Food will become scarce in urban areas, whereas farmers will be unable to sell their products. So this example shows that primary sector is dependent on tertiary sector, but it also shows that the industrial and the service sector is dependent on primary sector, because the individuals associated with industrial and service sector, they need food, and food is procured from the primary sector. So this shows that the three sectors are very much interdependent. Different sectors of Indian economy, that is primary sector, secondary sector and tertiary sector, are interdependent. Interdependence of different sectors mean that either one sector is selling its output to other sector, or it is purchasing input in the form of goods and services from other sectors. And this is what we saw in this previous table. We saw that primary sector provides input to manufacturing sector, and manufacturing sector also helps primary sector by manufacturing various agricultural inputs, and the service sector helps these two sectors. If primary and secondary sector do not require the services of tertiary sector, then tertiary sector is going to become completely useless. So all these three sectors are very much interdependent. Output of primary sector becomes the input of secondary sector. In other words, primary sector gets market for its products by selling it to secondary sector, and at the same time secondary sector gets its input from primary sector for further processing in industries. Similarly, service sector is helpful to both primary and secondary sector, as it provides services to both these sectors. In other words, primary and secondary sector are dependent on service sector for essential services like transportation, banking, insurance, storage, etc. Development of primary and secondary sector is just not possible without these services. In the same way, primary and secondary sectors create demand for service sector. That is because of primary sector and secondary sector, the service providers are able to sell their services. So that is it for today's class. Today we have studied about the classification of sectors of economy on the basis of nature of activities. There are three types of sectors, that is primary sector, secondary sector and tertiary sector, and all these three sectors are very much interdependent. So the assignment for today is: name the sector of economy that does not produce any good. The second question is: name the sectors of economy that mostly produces base materials for development of other sectors. So both these questions are very easy. The third question is: all the three sectors of economy are interdependent. Explain their interdependence, taking iron ore as an example. So the answer for first two question is going to be very short, but for the third one you need to write an elaborate answer, and you need to explain the interdependence of these three sectors by taking iron ore as an example. So that is it for today's class. Thank you.